Hello, welcome everyone to our weekly Salon webinar, where we come together to explore not just what we do in dementia research, but how we do it and who gets to be a part of that journey. I'm Adam Smith, and I'm delighted to be hosting this evening's discussion. And it's a topic which is important, but increasingly under attack in some parts of the world: equity, diversity, and inclusion, not just as an aspirational language, but as a foundation for good, just, and impactful research. And in dementia research, lived experience matters, culture matters, access matters. Who does the research and their interests and background matter. Who we include and how we listen to different voices can shape every aspect of the work we do. And yet, these aren't boxes to tick. These are systems that need to change. Joining me this evening, we have the brilliant Dr. Yolanda Ohene. And I always get the pronunciation of her surname wrong. Sorry, Yolanda. A neuroimaging researcher at the University of Manchester who is advancing MRI technology to study the blood-brain barrier in Alzheimer's disease. Or you were. I don't know. Is that still the case? It is. Good. But beyond her scientific work, she's a powerful advocate for inclusion and representation in STEM, and has joined us many times before on our podcasts as well, and is a brilliant speaker. We also have Dr. Hamied Haroon, also back, who was on a podcast a few months ago. It's a while ago now, though, who is a research fellow in biomedical MRI and the founder of the National Association for Disabled Staff Networks. His work in imaging technology is matched by his leadership in challenging structural barriers for disabled professionals in science. And did I get those right? That's good. Thank you very much. For those who are new to the Salon, who haven't joined us before, as you'll know, these happen every Wednesday at 8 p.m. and 12 noon. And essentially we pick a whole range of topics, research and career topics, and our guest speakers each deliver a kind of 10-15 minute discussion. Then I'm going to have some questions. We'll encourage you to ask questions as well. And we also hope this is a forum for discussion where we'll very much invite you to also share your own views and experiences. You can either do that in the chat, you can do that anonymously in the chat, or if you'd really like to join us on the stage and turn your camera on, you'd be welcome to do that too. Just say so in the chat, but we'll get to that at the end. We'll have our presentations, our talks first, and Yolanda has been volunteered to go first.
Oh, thank you.
I will shut up. I think that's enough from me. I will turn my camera and mic off and turn the stage over to you.
Brilliant. Thanks so much for the introduction, Adam. I will just share my screen. So I haven't used this platform before, so I'm a bit slower than usual, but let's see what we have here. So can you give me a signal, Adam, if you can see my slides?
We can't yet, Yolanda. While you're figuring that out, I have facts and figures to fill airtime. Did you know that only 1% of UK professors are black? That's from the Advanced Higher Education Survey in 2023, which is an astounding number. There we go. That's worked now.
Okay, brilliant. Yes, yep. And I'm happy that you brought that figure in, Adam, and I know that those numbers are moving up, but very, very slowly. So yes, thank you for having me today or this evening even on the Dementia Researcher podcast. Yeah, I'm delighted to speak about something that's very close to my heart: the importance of equity, diversity, and inclusion. So, as Adam mentioned in the intro, I'm a research fellow at the University of Manchester, and my work focuses on developing new non-invasive MRI techniques for the early detection of Alzheimer's disease. And the majority of my work has been focused around developing these techniques to better understand the role of the blood-brain barrier. And we know that this has changes very early within the disease. So my work is trying to increase the sensitivity of these new techniques to be able to measure these changes. And alongside my research, over the years, I've done various different equity, diversity, and inclusion work. And I think that especially at this moment, it's quite a hard time to talk about EDI, especially when it's not my official role. And so I'll give it a shot for kind of my experiences for this landscape within research. But I wanted to start with a quote, and I love Audre Lorde, and I think that this quote is very pertinent for this time at the moment, that survival is not an academic skill. And I think that this really can relate to many things that's happening in the world at the moment, and also for what we're seeing in the EDI space across the waters. But I thought, okay, so let me kind of like set the scene for equity, diversity, and inclusion by going through these three terms and thinking about our different multiple identities. So each of us have many identities that intersect, and some of them might be obvious, some of them might not, and they really make us who we are. And I think that the structures of many aspects in society make it that it might be easier for when you have particular identities compared to when you don't. And it's kind of taken me a long time, and since my undergraduate degree, to really think about, oh, how does this play out in the academic space? And I studied physics as an undergraduate, and I was the only Black student within our year, and there were 250 students at Imperial College London. And I was like looking around and thinking, wow, this year they've got the most women that they had, but there weren't many people of Black heritage. And I've kind of like always been of the belief of, you know, work hard, and then you'll get and you will succeed. But I think that's not always the case. And I think that this is kind of towards the end of my undergraduate degree when I started to understand maybe the difference between equality and equity, and thinking about, okay, thinking about if everyone's equal and giving everyone the same step up, that might not actually result in us all having the same outputs. And so equity is really kind of iterating those things depending on people's lived experiences, who they are, the structure, and mainly the structures of society, and what kind of differences we need to give different people in order for everyone to succeed. And I think that this is super important. So then moving from equity to diversity, being the only Black physicist, I was kind of used to being the only one in a room. And when I started my PhD is when I started to meet some other people who had had a similar experience to this. And it was when I was doing some science communication that I really recognized that there's not many people from ethnic minority groups in the STEM space. And so a few of us recognized this, and we came together and we thought, okay, what can we do about it? And so this was back in 2017, and we came together and formed a group called Minorities in STEM. And so this was along with Oz Ismail, who is a brilliant scientist and now the director of the scientific programs over at Alzheimer's Association, and Hannah Ayub and Alex Lathbridge, and myself, and we kind of thought we really need to support each other, first of all, especially during doing our PhDs. And then we also showcase the other people who are out there from ethnic minorities that might not get the platform or the space or the recognition in the research that they do. And so over 3 years, we built a network mainly on Twitter, and we had people sharing their experiences, and it really brought us together. And I have to say personally that I think without these people that I don't know if I would have actually made it through my PhD, because it's hard research wise, it's hard finding out who you are as a person, and having people with similar lived experiences to you really helps in this space, and gives a feeling of, okay, yeah, you know, you're not alone. And I think one of the highlights of being part of or co-founding the Minorities in STEM network was putting together the Minorities in STEM Symposium. So we did 2 of them in 2018, 2019. And just to show you some images of the event that we did in 2019, it was really nice to be able to bring people from all over the country to share experiences, to hear about people who had navigated a scientific career, about scientific writing, either for journals or for books or for blogs, and then doing science communication as well. So we had a mixture of workshops and talks to really support people's careers, academic careers. So it was for postgraduate students. And I think the thing that I really took away from putting on this event was the number of people that during the day said, wow, I haven't been in a space like this, and I feel so seen here. And I think that this is really important because sometimes you recognize that you don't feel seen when then you become seen. And also, I think, especially being someone of Black heritage, that sometimes you're invisible but visible, and that's something else that we have to navigate. Now, we kind of came to an end in 2020, but what was a brilliant thing was that from my physics background, that in 2020, we decided, the physicists amongst us decided to actually put together another network called the Blackett Lab Family, which is the UK collective for Black physicists, and do the same thing as Minorities in STEM. And so thinking about all of the different disciplines of science, I think physicists are very, very underrepresented from Black heritage. And so we wanted a mission to kind of diversify the perspectives of physics by promoting Black representation at all levels. So our ethos is to represent. So we're Black physicists and we're proud to be Black physicists, to connect with each other. So lots of the physicists that I know or I knew in 2020 were London based. And so we really branched out to find the other physicists across the UK. And then also to inspire. So now we're doing various different programs for both school students and undergraduates to kind of try to plug a little bit the leaky pipeline for Black students. So alongside kind of like these 2 initiatives, I've done various other initiatives over the time that I have been within academia. So bringing together Black scientists, scientists from ethnic minority backgrounds, and then also mentoring schemes for people from underrepresented backgrounds in undergraduate. And most recently, I've kind of been branching out my research to think about the inclusive space in research. So how can we make the research itself more inclusive? Now, all of this is great, and sometimes it's difficult though to have to understand the impact that it has on the individuals that attend these events. But we were really lucky to be able to publish some of our lessons for Black physicists and engineers a couple of years ago. And I think that this is a really great way to get the word out for kind of this engagement work that we're doing to a wider audience. Now, thinking about the final point of EDI and inclusion is really going back to this point about actually how can we increase inclusion within in both the workspaces and the research that we do. And so over the last couple of years, I've started to recognize that in the dementia space that there are increasingly more and more evidence that dementia affects the Black community and the South Asian community more, and perhaps some of the outcomes are worse for people from these communities. However, we're often very much underrepresented within the research itself. And so it's kind of a double-edged sword that while we're not included, we're also kind of the worst off for some of these subtypes of dementia. And so I've been thinking about this for the last couple of years, and this all culminated in my ideas between thinking about putting together projects for bringing scientists together, also inclusion. And I was lucky enough to get one of the Wellcome Accelerator Awards. So this is focused around these new MRI techniques that I'm developing for early detection of dementia. But also what I'm really, really excited about is to do a public engagement event for specifically the Black community in Manchester to better understand some of the barriers to inclusion in research. So back to my quote that survival is not an academic skill from Audre Lorde. I think what's really beautiful is that she goes on to say that it's learning how to stand alone, unpopular, and sometimes reviled, but how to make a common cause with those identified outside of the structures in order to define and seek a world in which we can all flourish. So I'll leave you with that. And I think it really resonates with me in thinking about actually how can I bring some of this inclusion work to the research that I do. And I'll pass on back to Adam. Thanks a lot for listening.
Thank you, Yolanda, and thank you so much for sharing some about your own journey there and the things that have helped you. And then I love the way you rounded it back to your research as well, because I was talking to Hamied at the start about I'd left this kind of really open brief, and I wasn't sure whether you were going to talk about, kind of careers or research or both. So you did both. I'm really interested to know, Hamied, if you're patient for a second, what made the difference for you? Like, as you said, I mean, you even now today, I would imagine that there's an underrepresentation of women and Black women, especially so in physics and in research in general. How did you break through? What's the magic recipe?
Yeah, I think it's a good question.
Before, sorry.
It's a good question, and I think that's something that I've been considering over the years. But sometimes I think, sometimes I create a narrative or like think about a narrative of like being the only one. And yes, in quite a lot of the spaces, I might be the only one. But what I'm really lucky to have is such an amazing group of friends, family, supporters around that have helped at many steps of the journey. So in who are in scientific fields and not. And so in that way, that I feel that I'm very lucky to be able to make connections with quite a lot of people, to feel supported in different ways, in different aspects of my life. And so I think that is such a, it can be so underrated for who's around you, who's your support system, who's your inner circle. And if you have people that will uplift you, I think that is a brilliant recipe for like just doing what you're passionate in, despite maybe feeling alone sometimes.
And then, I mean, I guess as a bit of a trailblazer, I know for a fact you're making a difference. One of our regular contributors, Yasmin Bonsu, who was doing a placement year at University of Oxford, and she had written for us about what it's like to do a placement and undergrad, and saw you present at the AR UK conference in, I can't remember where it was, I think Liverpool the year before last, and came on our podcast afterwards and said that was the first time that they'd seen somebody that they genuinely thought was like them as a kind of young Black woman, this first time they'd ever seen anybody like them actually presenting at a scientific conference. And I said, I know Yolanda, she's amazing. You should approach her. She'd happily talk to you. I feel sure, don't be shy. But she was like, oh my God, I don't know. I couldn't talk to her. I said, no, you really should. I hope she did.
Yeah, no, they're like, she should definitely come and talk to me. And I feel like it's amazing because you hear the phrase like, you can't be what you don't see. And I think that quite early in my sort of like academic career, like when I was an undergraduate, I had people who took me to talks, and I met Black academics, and I think I was very lucky to do that at an early stage in my career. So yeah, it's just amazing. Yeah, it's amazing, the feeling, because when you're like, wow, I actually now resonate on a different level in this space. So that's really lovely to hear also. So thanks for sharing, Adam.
I think also as well, you get that driver to pass that along, don't you? That I think, when you've gone through those things yourself, I think particularly kind of the researchers I know who are from minoritized communities, whether that's people from the LGBTQ community or people from different minority backgrounds, that you find that they're far more approachable, I think, than anybody else in terms of trying to make sure that they share and support the rest of the community to come through. Particularly where they might not get that same institutional support, although I'm sure institutions would argue that they're great at this now, although our survey from 2 years ago would suggest otherwise. But yeah, you have been an inspiration to many. Thank you, Yolanda. Let's hear from Hamied now, and then we'll have lots of time for more chat and questions. So do keep your questions coming. We'll get to those afterwards. Hamied, over to you. I'll stick around till your slide share works.
Thank you. Let's see if this goes. Okay, are we good?
We are, thank you.
Fantastic. So I just want to start by saying that Yolanda is a huge inspiration to me. I loved that talk, and I'm not sure how I'm supposed to follow that. I've kind of posed the question that equity, diversity, inclusion, is it really that important? Of course it is. So without equality, diversity, equity, even, and inclusion, I feel like privilege and power, those with privilege, kind of keep that power, keep hold of power, keep hold of the directions that we take. But when you don't have different perspectives there, you kind of impede creativity, you impede innovation if there aren't more voices saying different things. If you have a room full of people who are all basically the same, with the same backgrounds, the same kind of identities, then all the voices will be saying the same thing. There'll be nothing new from conversations in that room. Things will be pretty stagnant, not really going very far. More importantly, though, that would not represent the societies and the global communities that we want to work with and make a difference for. So such a space without equity, without diversity, without inclusion, really reinforces misconceptions, the bigotry, the bias, the marginalization, especially in the current climate, would just reinforce that, would allow that to continue without being challenged, if you see what I mean. So as Yolanda has already said, equity, don't you mean equality? So equality is indeed treating everyone the same, whereas equity is realizing that everyone is different and requires different kinds of support to have the same opportunities to live, to work, and to thrive. And this cartoon is a great one I picked up from the internet, where equity is you give the same box to 3 different kinds of people, and they will provide the same kind of level up, so these people can look over the fence. But it doesn't work for everybody to be given the same those same boxes. So equity is where the tall guy gets a 1 box, the short girl gets 2 boxes, and the wheelchair user can go up a ramp, and they can all look over that fence together. So that is equity to me. Human diversity is so rich, so beautiful, in terms of all the different identities, characteristics that we hold, and intersectionality of our different characteristics, our different identities and backgrounds. Socioeconomic status is so very important, brings that real richness to us as people. We all have our own unique experiences, our own unique stories to tell. No two people with the same characteristics even will have the same story, will have the same experiences. Everyone has a unique and rich perspective to offer. So inclusion for me means having place at the table, which Yolanda also mentioned, and to be embedded in the creation of ideas and design of things together from the start, and where difference is welcomed, where it's not just welcomed but valued and nurtured even. That difference is a good thing. Being seen and heard and feeling that you are seen and heard is part of that inclusion. Feeling that you belong to a space and that you are respected for who you are and that you can be authentic in that space and that there is access for everybody. Breaking down those barriers that marginalize different groups and that everyone can enter through the same door. I'm going to come back to that concept in a second. So I went to a university, much like Yolanda. I did a degree in physics as well at what used to be the University of Manchester Institute of Science and Technology. This was young ago when I did my physics degree. And the campus was not all accessible to me. So I got elected to the Students' Union to be the Disabled Access Secretary. And the Students' Union building was one building on campus where the Students' Union Council chamber was up on the 3rd floor and was really the only space where the Union Council could meet. And it was the only building that didn't have a lift to get up there. So my colleagues, my fellow students would have to carry me up the stairs, up the stairwells to get up to the 3rd floor, which wasn't just unsafe, it was pretty humiliating even and dehumanizing. So we decided we needed to do something about this and protest at the lack of access. So I ended up doing a bungee jump in my wheelchair at the side of the main road going through campus, Oxford Road, up 180 foot up in the air. This is a shot of me mid-bungee, kind of upside down in my wheelchair, and my parents screaming on the ground at what the hell are you doing? And this featured in the Times Higher Education and lots of other places. This was really the start of my activism in terms of disability access. So that was being a disabled student. And again, as Yolanda said, I think I was the only wheelchair user in my physics year. And I don't think I saw very many other wheelchair using students on campus at all. So yeah, feeling very much like it was just me. So I became a member of staff. Thankfully, I got a job after doing my PhD. But whatever support I had as a disabled student in terms of the disabled students' allowances, the disability support office at university, supporting disabled students, whatever support was there as a student, I suddenly lost everything, lost all of that. So we formed a disabled staff network at our university, and the work we did to bring in support for disabled staff alongside what was already there for disabled students led on to the creation, I think it's like 11 years ago now, at the University of Manchester. We held a conference for and about disabled staff and invited disabled staff from universities, colleges, NHS trusts, and even the BBC BBC and ITV and all those organizations were represented. Over 100 people came from all over the country, and it was wonderful. And we launched this National Association of Disabled Staff Networks at that time. And we are a super network of disabled staff networks. We do focus on the tertiary education sector, so universities and colleges, and other organizations in the public sector, such as NHS trusts. And our strapline is that we are defining, connecting, and representing ourselves. We know what's best for us, and so it's up to us to define that. We welcome any individual and organization from any sector committed to advancing the equality, equity, diversity, inclusion, and access of disabled staff. We act as a collective platform to share experiences and good practice and examine those challenges and opportunities we face together. We're nothing to do with the government, which is great. We are independent, self-determining, and an intersectional and dynamic community led by and made up of impassioned disabled people. So, in terms of language, let me ask you, how do these words make you feel? Words like abnormal, invalid, handicapped, spastic, dumb, vulnerable. These are kind of words that are often used to describe disabled people, especially the words abnormal and invalid are used a lot in science, in research, to actually describe disabled people, to make us feel, and these do make us feel, make me feel, unwelcome, just like we're broken, we need to be fixed, we don't belong, we're not right, there's so much wrong with us, and we need to be fixed to fit in somehow. So yeah, that's how these words make us feel when they're used. And these words really connect to what is known as the medical model of disability, where disabled people are, us as disabled people, we are seen as a problem and we need fixing. We need to be made normal in order to fit into society. But something that's quite emancipatory to me when I discovered this was the social model of disability. And that model says that, well, that model itself identifies systemic barriers, negative attitudes, and exclusion by society, whether it's on purpose or inadvertently. That means it's society that is the main contributory factor in disabling people. So I prefer to use the word disabled person rather than to use person with disabilities. I don't come with baggage in terms of disabilities. I am disabled by society mostly, and that includes prejudice and ignorance and stigma, negative attitudes, inaccessible places, but not just places, transport, conversations and information. So people with learning difficulties or people with the late stages of Alzheimer's and other forms of dementia, where we don't provide information in, say, easy read format or in other formats that people can understand rather than written information. Information where, like, there are important briefings where there are no BSL interpreters, you miss out a whole sector of society of deaf BSL users from those conversations. There are also, so barriers are also faced by people with hidden impairments where you can't see those disabilities. You can see mine, I'm a wheelchair user, you can spot that I'm disabled from a mile off, but there are many people with hidden impairments and invisible disabilities who you don't really get a look in much of the time. People also with chronic illnesses, long-time health conditions, people who are neurodivergent as well, must be included in this. And there's a great video on a website by the disability charity called Scope, where disabled people, like for us, what the social model of disability means to us as disabled people. So what we're faced with in academia is this whole really rubbish notion of what makes an ideal academic. And this is what we're fighting all the time. So this comes from this particular diagram here comes from a study by Professor Kate Sang at Heriot-Watt University from back in 2017, where she interviewed disabled academics, disabled colleagues, and kind of brought together these notions of what makes an ideal academic. That you should be white, you should be a man, you should be able to go to conferences wherever they are, you should have no caring responsibility, you should have no doubts, you should have no dietary requirements, and particularly that you don't need to use the toilet. And so all of these kind of perceptions of what makes an ideal academic in terms of being successful in academia are really breaking people. So as a mold that we're made to fit into, the mold itself is breaking colleagues. So many colleagues leave academia, leave research, because they don't fit this, because they can't meet all of these ideals. But instead of that, we need to break the mold so more people will stay, so that more people will be happier with being in research and contributing to the really vital work that we do. So within the National Association of Disabled Staff Networks, we set up a STEM action group. And very recently, we published what we call a white paper, so our position paper, giving recommendations of moving STEM towards a fully inclusive environment for disabled people. So we launched this at the University of Strathclyde at the end of March. And the paper itself is available on the NADSN website through the STEM Action Group page. And we're using hashtags for NADSN white paper and disabled in STEM. And we're going to be following up that launch with another event at the Wellcome Trust, inviting politicians and policymakers and other influencers within the research environment, so funding bodies and learned societies, to come together and to hear what we have to say about the recommendations for change that we want to see happen. There's a lot of talk when it comes to EDI. What we really want and what we really need is action now, which is even more imperative than it has been before, especially with all the rhetoric coming from different places of the globe. So really looking forward to that. And everyone is very welcome, invited, in fact, to please take a look at this white paper. So we're working with the all-party parliamentary group on diversity and inclusion in STEM, which is supported by the British Science Association. And right now they're very interested in EDI strategies and data. So we're working with them to kind of pull down some barriers when it comes to data around disability. Disability is not well represented in data, and we need to look at how to address that. So Heriot-Watt University as well is leading the EDI caucus, which is funded by UKRI and the British Academy. And we have some funding from them, in fact, between the EDI caucus and NADSN, to work with a brilliant academic, Dr. Catherine Dean at the University of East Anglia, who's doing a project on accessible laboratories. So really kind of learning from what they've done at the University of East Anglia and trying to roll this out for the universities. We're also a lead partner on the University of Sheffield's two major projects with the Wellcome Trust. One is Disability Matters, where actually disabled people are put in the driving seat of health and science research, rather than being the object of it, which we usually and almost always are. And then to break down the ableism in research cultures and how we can make universities a more anti-ableist environment to work in as researchers. So both that, I mean, all of these projects are ongoing and hopefully will produce some brilliant outputs. One thing that we really struggle with as disabled people in HE, in higher education and research, is that even within EDI, disability seems to be the poor partner in EDI, the poor kind of cousin, the one that kind of misses the radar. And this could be because of the charter marks in higher education. We have the Athena Swan around gender equality. To some extent, the race equality charter mark highlights the issues around race and ethnicity in academia, and the Stonewall mark for LGBTQ+. But when it comes to disability, we're left with the disability confidence scheme from the government, which is a bit trash. And sorry, I didn't say that. And the Business Disability Forum's disability standard, which really don't fill that gap when it comes to disability in HE. So we've decided to take the reins ourselves, and within NADSN, we're creating this brand new framework around realizing inclusion of disabled employees in higher education, including for researchers, academics, professional services staff in higher education, and trying to just really start by sharing best practice across the sector. So a framework rather than a charter mark that will make a difference to disabled people and disabled colleagues on the ground, rather than just giving awards to institutions, real change taking place, we hope. So that's what we're pushing and working very hard on right now. And then lastly, at the university, we've started a brilliant series of talks. Just let's talk about disability. Let's talk about our experiences, our lived experience. I don't like the word lived. We're not dead yet, so we're living experience of disability with people of influence at the university, senior leaders. So I got to talk to Professor Dame Nancy Rothwell when she was the VC at our university, and then more recently with the new VC, Duncan and Iverson. And just brilliant to have those open discussions, open conversations with the leaderships of our universities. And we're hoping again to roll this out across the sector, so these conversations take place more where they're needed. And of course, just ending on this, that nothing about us without us, that we must be front and center, whether we're disabled or people living with dementia. We have to be front and center of whatever is going on out there that affects us and our lives. Thank you.
Yeah, that's brilliant, and I love. I know both you and Yolanda used this slide with the people looking over the wall. I love that slide. That slide for me was the thing. You just needed to do that. Any explanation needed on the difference between equity and equality, that slide nails it every time. I really do like that. I'm interested to hear your views, because obviously you've, kind of campaigned through your career for what you've needed to progress your own career. You've been so instrumental in making differences for people. Can you kind of, how do you think early career researchers or the people watching this evening could be encouraged or supported to challenge inequalities in their institution? Not all of them are going to go do a bungee jump like their building, but what everyday things would you encourage people to do? And not just people that are facing challenges themselves, but for those that traditionally have an easier ride of things.
That's a really great point, Adam. So I think, first of all, for those who face challenges themselves, is to find your community, to find networks, to find groups of people to be with and to share with. So having our disabled staff network at the university, and other universities have these as well, are a great place to be, to find support, to kind of share experiences, to share support, advice, signposting, and just kind of having that peer support around you is really important, so you don't feel alone, like it's just you that are facing those challenges. Often when you talk to other people, you find out it isn't just you. you're not the only one going through those challenges, and people will have, things they've tried and tested, and will know, some way of helping. And if not, then just sharing those experiences can be powerful enough, having that space to do that. As for people who don't face those challenges, being an ally is so very important. Trying to, well, not trying to, but just listening to people's experiences, being empathetic as well. So I can't live the experiences of somebody who is, for example, deaf. But just more recently, I've been learning about the differences between BSL users and other deaf people within the research community, and what their experiences are like, and some of the challenges they face. So just listening to people, and then what's the word? Advocating for people as well. They will, and working with those people, though, not advocating over people's heads, but working with people and being an ally, where because sometimes facing challenges and fighting for the good fight is quite a burden. It takes a lot of energy and resource that can be exhausting. So it's good to share that with others, and allies are a brilliant way of kind of sharing that.
And that's the kind of constant fallback argument, isn't it? You hit the nail on the head there when you talk about the amount of resource, the time, the effort that so many institutions fall back on. Oh, we haven't got the resources to do that for the, we're talking about a small number of people, 0.01% of our students or our or people with lived experience have that, or study participants come from that community. So we don't, but the effort to reach them is, equal to what it is for the 90%, for the majority. I mean, where do you, the argument just doesn't stand up anymore, does it? Or does it? Because it's still used for why some of these programs and things don't exist. I mean, I guess that's one of the arguments that's being used in the US right now for why, we spend so much money on research looking into care communities for Latino communities, or how transgender people might be affected by dementia, for example. What's the argument for saying that deserves the resource?
Ooh, that's a really good one.
Sorry, I'm not making this political.
Yolanda, what do you think? Are you on there, Yolanda? Maybe you have some comments on that.
Oh yeah, I mean, I feel like everyone deserves the resource, and actually, there's a thing. I think I started by thinking about the equity side of things, and that it's not. We don't want to have labels. We don't want to have to put people in boxes to say that you're from this group or you're from that group. But I think sometimes it is necessary, and especially when people are underrepresented, and until there is equity, it will be necessary to give resources to these different groups of people. Yeah, so I mean, I think we should be fighting for the most marginalized in our societies, and that's like the bottom line.
Well, and that counts both for in terms of careers and the researchers, doesn't it? But also for the research that's been done, as you said, to make sure that if you don't separate out and say, right, we want to fund research into this, it just doesn't happen, because you don't get people from marginalized communities participating in drug trials if you don't make a concerted effort to really deeply reach into those communities, and not just we were talking about this before, but not just skim the surface, which I guess is something I gather this is something you're looking at now in your own research, Yolanda.
Yeah, well, trying to, and I suppose a starting point often in sort of like biological research is thinking about like who's affected the most in certain conditions. And so I I think it's difficult with thinking about ethnicity because, of course, that's not like a biological trait, and so there's often, or there's always, other factors which are driving maybe those biological differences. But being able to find ethical ways to be able to do this research is, I think it's needed more now than ever, probably.
But also, I think we have global challenges in terms of health. So, the research that we do has to be then being able to help all sorts of different kinds of communities around the globe. So if we don't include different groups and make sure that we're including everybody in the research we do, then the research isn't going to be, in kind of science lingo, you'd say applicable to those different groups, to the people of different backgrounds. So what we're really doing is shooting ourselves in the foot. So like drugs trials, for example, as you mentioned before, Adam, that with drugs trials and the dosages and even when you should take those drugs, they're all based on mostly white populations. Those same dosages don't work for other communities from other parts of the world. Things, things work slightly differently for people of different backgrounds. So yeah, that's and what we were talking about before, Yolanda, is how our exclusion criteria for various research studies actually excludes the people who probably need to be in that research most. Is how we kind of exclude and marginalize people that way.
Yeah, I mean, I remember this before. So we're looking at, it's come up time and time again that it's drug trials mostly participated white middle class people because they're the ones that are particularly motivated. They're the ones that, and when we started to look at the reasons why certain communities of people weren't involved, there were, all kinds of exclusion factors, and also as well, but that extended into engaging with healthcare as a whole. That that they're the same people who have low diagnosis rates, that go to GPs less often, that do these things. And sadly, I don't think we've really got particularly good at systematically improving that. Everything I've seen is always a program, it's an initiative, it's a kind of one-off activity that might have been impactful, but then isn't necessarily. It always seems to come down to one or two really passionate individuals. And when they leave, when they move on, if they're really good at their job, they become successful, they move on, and whatever they did hasn't been embedded and sustainable. And that's, I think, a frustration, particularly for PhD students, when they've done something like that as part of their PhD, and then you have to move on.
Yeah,
I
was going to say, I think that it's going to be interesting to see how this plays out in terms of like the rise of personalized medicine. And because that gives an opportunity to really like delve down into like the individual characteristics and so on. And so, let's see how things can merge, how things can improve, how perhaps we won't propagate the same biases that we have previously. I hope that that's what we see, but I don't know. History, it sometimes repeats itself and sometimes doesn't. So let's hope that we're on the better side of it.
Yeah. What we have to be careful of, I think, excuse me, is about AI and the rise of AI and how biased the data that AI is trained on is too, and that it doesn't represent different kinds of people. Again, it's very, very biased towards white people and people from richer nations, if you like. So AI is something to be very wary of, I believe. And that also is going to be interesting to see. So we have lots of big data out there, projects like the UK Biobank, for example, or ADNI, for Alzheimer's imaging data and all of these kind of databases. But, almost 100% of their participants are white people. So, you know, there's not enough effort to diversify, to include people of other backgrounds in these big data.
And that's where I guess the kind of some of the stuff that's happening in the US is alarming as well right now, isn't it? Whereas the other, you know, at the moment in the UK, including EDI, are saying we're going to actually address this, actually probably puts you on a slightly more favourable stand. And we still do have, you know, UKRI, Wellcome Trust, and the NIHR still putting out funding calls specifically asking for research on topics that would, you know, for include EDI have an element to that, or that they're addressing an unmet need somewhere in healthcare, whereas actually that's been reversed in other parts of the world. And the AI point you make is really a good one. I actually have this in my notes that in practice, the serious consequences we're already seeing in using AI is facial recognition systems give better responses to lighter skin tones. Large language models are reproduced based on texts that were primarily written by white, non-minoritized people, and healthcare algorithms making poorer decisions from people with ethnic minorities because they've been trained on data from mostly white populations.
Exactly.
And so are you seeing, I mean, interestingly, are you seeing that? Because I'm guessing you're both you're at the forefront of your fields, both of you. Do you draw on some of those large data sets? How are you seeing that impact already?
So I suppose from my perspective, because I'm very much in the lab and I'm just translating some of these techniques to like small population studies. It's not so like prevalent in my research right now, but I'm very aware that it's going to be. And so I need to keep my finger on the pulse to ensure that like these kind of biases don't trickle in.
And I had a question here. We're out of time, and I've got my final top 10 tips that I needed to get through. But I had a couple of questions that I'm going to ask to finish on. Let's have a look. I had them. They're here somewhere. If there was one structural change you could make in dementia research, what would it be if you could enact that tomorrow? Sorry, that's an awfully big question to put on the spot. I mean, it could be anything. Could be, you know, ring fence funding from funders. It could be, you know, massive data sets to address recruitment or data, or well, I don't know. What do you think would make a difference?
So I think whenever we talk about dementia research, there's a huge amount of excitement about how it could change people's lives. You know, people who are living with dementia right now, their carers and families know how devastating a condition or conditions dementias can be. So they're really excited, really kind of behind us in terms of the research that we're doing. But I think what's really important is us engaging with people and being I think, not just engaging, but having those conversations with people living with dementia and their carers and families about where we are right now with the research, about, you know, where we're looking for in the kind of coming future and what we need to do to get there, kind of thing. That would, I think would kind of like, it's almost like they're waiting for us to come up with the answer and give them the answer, but we're working towards it. We've got such a long way to go. Yeah, get those answers. I don't know if you agree, Yolanda.
Yeah, I agree a lot. I feel like co-production, engagement, like that's definitely. I would love to see that more, like in. Let's say tomorrow. if it was to wage a magnet wand, let's go with tomorrow.
I'm going to add mine to that, because I constantly see, and because I spend a lot of time talking to PhD students and others, is the kind of the implementation gap. that closing the loop on between a research discovery and research implementation, and I think that cuts above, I mean, particularly in kind of care and qualitative work, there's so many brilliant discoveries made every day of insightful things that we discover, particularly from PhD research, that never really gets beyond being in a publication or in a thesis.
Exactly.
But if really considered, properly costed out, thought through, if there was a more systematic way of assessing research findings to cherry pick out the things that we could do and to translate those into policy and real life services, a kind of, you know, almost like an observatory that's taking those findings and then embedded into healthcare or into social care or into even into farm or wherever it is, to say, oh, that's an interesting thing, we could use that. And I think the work you're both doing on neuroimaging, so exciting right now, the potential to bring all those biomarkers together that are emerging between blood and fluids and imaging. And I saw at the AIC, I think a year before last, this kind of tiny portable MRI that can go in the back of a van, but it gives a really low quality image, but combined with machine learning and AI, it upscales it. Seeing that become, you know, you can see that in your GP surgery combined with the eye scans that they'll do in your, you know, from Retispec or somebody at your to look at amyloid combined with blood. And if we can make that more spread out across the health system, so it does touch even those places that we know minoritized communities might still go for eye tests a little bit better, or might go to a GP but won't go to hospital, we can break down some of those barriers maybe. Anyway, God, I could be rambling on. Do you know what? So for everybody who's watching this, who's still stuck with us despite being 5 minutes over time and me keeping my two guests away from their dinner, one thing that we've done, so Dementia Researcher website has almost 3,000 pages of content that we've accumulated over the last 5 years. This is everything from webinar transcripts, podcast transcripts, hundreds, and I think there's over 600 blogs in there written by researchers and people with lived experience, articles, job descriptions, you name it. We've got thousands and thousands of pages of content, and we've given an AI, large language model AI, access to learn just from our content, not from the internet, just from our own content. So we know it's trustworthy, reliable, even if some of it might be a little bit out of date or controversial. And every week I ask it to give me 10 top tips on whatever the topic is, and then I see if you've touched on these things that are accumulated knowledge suggests. So I asked it for 10 top tips on what we can do about EDI in research and careers, and here we are. Number 1, recruit with purpose, not just process. Go beyond standard outreach, engage with underrepresented communities early in a study, offer mentorship, and create entry routes that account for structural barriers, particularly in study recruit. So that one's obviously about study recruitment. Number 2, I think you both talked about that as well, and I know Yolanda, you're living that right now. Number 2, diversity in research participation, design inclusive studies by involving patients, carers, people with lived experience, and communities from diverse backgrounds in your planning, not just as participants. Number 3, make inclusion part of the job description. EDI values should be embedded into roles and appraisals and promotions, not tacked on as extracurricular, but they should be part of the job, not just an extra thing. Number 4, enable access, not just opportunity. Consider physical, sensory, digital, cultural accessibility at every stage, from lab design right through to events and communication materials and other things you do. I'd really like to talk to you afterwards, Hamied, about how we can get involved with your association as well, because it's something that we do a lot on. And, you know, that's why all of our blogs come with audio narrations, because we have a community of people who can't read them on the screen, but they could listen to them. So, you know, we do those things. But I feel sure there's more we could do. Number 5, challenge academic gatekeeping, support open access publishing, flexible career paths, and alternative credentials to to reduce exclusivity in academia. So it isn't all just people who went through A-levels and went to undergrad, that there are so many different routes into that, through research assistants, through different ways into lab research, not just in the traditional model that we look to. Build feedback loops from lived experience, include those with dementia carers, underrepresented groups on advisory panels and co-design projects. I think we've probably a bit of duplication there. Number 7, measure what matters, collect and act on demographic data. Don't just publish it. Set targets, track progress, be transparent about outcomes. Number 8, invest in inclusive leadership, provide coaching, development tailored to minoritized researchers so leaders don't replicate existing inequalities. We had a great session last week on coaching as opposed to mentorship, which is really worth going back to if you missed that. Number 9, normalize talking about inequality, create safe, regular places for staff and students to share their experiences and ideas without fear of backlash or tokenism. And last but not least, number 10, share the work, share the credit. Recognize that EDI is a collective responsibility, not the burden of underrepresented people, and value the reward of those that lead and change it. I feel slightly at odds here, having brought in two people who to talk to the topic, that I'm guilty of that. But equally, if I brought on 3 people that look like me to talk about that, that would have probably also been a problem. But I thank you so much. I think you touched on all of those things there, and you've been incredible presenters this evening. I think you've given us a great deal to think about. Let me just go through our comments before we finish off. We didn't get any specific questions, but we did have, Julie said her mother was the only woman in her physics BSc course at Exeter University in 1950s, and it doesn't feel that particularly changed. Dahi, who is really passionate on this topic, has mentioned a few times about problems across the world. And now that dementia research is moving into biomarkers, for example, or adaptive technologies, it's important to include everybody. Absolutely couldn't agree more. Well, that's all we've got time for today. We'll be back next week when we're going to be talking about listening and communication skills with Russell Chander from University of New South Wales and Shamali Chowdhury from Indiana University School of Medicine. So do join us next week for listening and communication skills. In the meantime, I've been Adam Smith, and you've been listening to the brilliant Dr. Yolanda Ohene and the incredible Dr. Hamied Haroon. Oh, I feel it should be Professor Hamied Haroon by now. I must be on the cards. If nobody's suggested that already, you need to apply, Hamied. It's overdue, I feel sure.
Thank you.
Thank you so much. You've both been amazing. I look forward to seeing you all next week, and have a great day. And if this topic has affected you in any way, do reach out, get in touch. We're all of us are in the community. You can send messages through there. And also as well, we do have our anonymous chat now, which is called the Solutions Lab, where you can send messages to us anonymously if you like, or put your name to them with your problem, whether that's we had one this week with somebody who's feeling very overwhelmed with looking for a PhD. Do put your questions in there and we'll find the right people to get answers to you, and that can all be very securely and safely done as well. Thank you so much. Have a great rest of the evening.
Thanks, Adam.
Thanks. Bye-bye.
Bye. Well done, Yolanda. That was amazing.
Yeah, great to see you, Hamied.
Good to see you too. I loved your slides, Yolanda. Very beautiful presentation.